G'day everyone and welcome back to Genesis Starseeds and Patriots of Down Under for another small episode of Genesis for a New Space Race. I do apologise, I got the tongue twist today. But yeah, I do apologise for my absence in the last 2-3 weeks, I believe it seems, since my last post. And I do apologise because I've had some pretty big things that I've had to take care of and look after, and it was a dear friend that needed my attention, and I've had to be there for her through some pretty tough times. But prayers and energy and good thoughts, and have been a safe space and everything like that to created for them to have a place where they feel good to progress and move forward. I was just able to help facilitate that in some way. In helping them get there, but at the same time, it's been a tedious 3 weeks, and they needed my help, and I was able to be of service. And that's a very important message to everyone as well. Is that when you see that you can make it change or have the ability to help where you can, don't walk by, as I've said before. Don't turn a blind eye and say, no, they'll be all right. If you know that you can make change and you have the ability to, please help that person, because it's humane to, one. And secondly, when you want someone to help you too, hopefully if you were down and out, I know I would. So just remember, if you have the ability to make change or help or be of service in life, it's all part and parcel of moving through this and actually getting through that essentially. Anyway, moving on. Today we are here for Genesis for a New Space Race. I hope and trust that everyone enjoyed it, my new intro. I just worked on that yesterday. It was only a small little jiggle of my fingers on the keyboards and the mouse and put it all together, but I hope you've enjoyed it. It's our new intro from here on in. I found that over time, the song itself has a very positive message, the previous intro song. It has a very powerful message of being forthright, standing up and being honourable and being that warrior for truth, using your mind and being conscious. Okay, but at the same time, the vibration it was giving off for me over a period of time as I am raising mine, the song itself no longer does service to me or I feel to the audience. I felt a softer approach would be more appropriate, and I feel that the song that I found doing this new intro is more appropriate, and I hope you do too. And some of the visuals that I put together with it, it's a little bit more simplified. Simple is best in life. So please, if you like the actual new trailer, not trailer, but intro that I put together for the show, leave your comments below. And while you're here too, if there's newcomers, please subscribe now and hit that notification bell as well, so you can keep up to date with our newest videos as we come out. I do promise that I will be more consistent very shortly. This is just I was in the process of being consistent, and this came up and I had to deal with it. But I do apologize, as I said, once again. And this was it was a situation that was very much in need of my attention. They are they're of gratitude, believe me, and none of it could happen for them if all of the people that were involved were not working together to help this person get to where they need to be. So I will be more consistent now that things have moved on and gotten, well, me moving forward as well. And actually, things are open. So, in saying that, let's get to it, everyone. Okay, so let's move over to chapter 6, which was USA shares the secret of the new plane with allies. So let's begin with, shall we? All right. As World War II began, Allied intelligence speculated that the Germans also had developed the round wing plane, but no one learned if the enemy had turned out 10 or 1,000, nor when or where they would strike. The first was feared, and the US geared itself to produce a counterforce with plans calling for preponderance of their own round wing planes in answer to the German threat. The ultimate military advantage of Carwell's new aerodynamic invention had been realized by government authorities as far back as its discovery in 1936. President Roosevelt had shared the secret with Prime Minister Mackenzie King of Canada, outlining the gravity of keeping classified development and testing of a new round plane. Oops, a little bit too fast, sorry. In 1936, the Canadian Prime Minister, on hearing the difficulty of the security and the need to challenge the Germans in case of hostilities, had arranged to place a hidden valley in central British Columbia on Canada's west coast, off limits to settlement. The 300 square mile valley was so remote and without road entry that only a bird would be able to enter this wild refuge undetected. The hideout was designated to become the new home of the round-wing plane Endeavour, and, in a far-sighted act of wisdom, President Roosevelt decided to give the project national priority and share the development of the round-wing plane with the Canadians and British. Thus, in 1936, the impenetrable inland hideout in British Columbia saw hundreds of surveyors and planners break solitude for a new industry in town. In 1938, roads were being built, and a 3-mile tunnel for a 2-track electric railroad was cut by hard rock miners through solid mountain into the valley domain. No one guessed the reason. And in the valley proper, forests were felled, heavy roads and airstrips were built, towns and factory sites were laid out, and the world's first spacecraft manufacturing facilities were feverishly erected. What's that tell you, everyone? Okay. The fact that the world's first spacecraft manufacturing facilities were feverishly erected in that part of the world, you need to remember. Okay. This is a point in history in our past where this is only one side of the actual pond, whereas Germany was already developing these sorts of things as well. Okay, so we have to remember these things. Okay, this is not the world's first spacecraft manufacturing facility. The first spacecraft manufacturing facility was in Germany. Okay. By January 30th of 1942, the Cold War group had arrived from Los Alamos. Foreign espionage surveillance would again be without their quarry. 2 top US scientists, John S. Hershag, structural design, and John B. Myers, instrumentation, were assigned to Cold War staff, and also John B. Adams, of whom records did not give country of origin. A separate international team assumed specific tasks also. This team included Colonel Charles Haddon of England, who had done yeoman service in the Royal Air Force Defence of London. Haddon had formerly taught physics at the British University. An American of 1848 German descent, Felix S.N., was also part of the team. Canada sent Stewart L. McLean, kin of Prime Minister Mackenzie King. McLean had taught advanced mathematics at the University of Ottawa. This team of engineers first built models and tested them for stress and wind in wind tunnels. For stress in wind tunnels, I should say, sorry. They also worked on aviation fuels for the new jet motors. Throughout their terms of service, Haddon and McLean chafed to get out of the round-wing engineering functions into conventional military combat, but were refused permission to leave. See the epilogue for their awards for their achievements. So we'll check the epilogues out at the end of all of this. Northwestern University's lab also became a part of the British Columbia operation. Russian scientific participation had been authorized by President Roosevelt, but the chiefs of staff in the USA and Great Britain refused to endorse direct Soviet participation. Russian advisors were therefore sent to the USA, but were never given visas to the heart of the project in Canada. Wow. New workers were recruited to run the various enterprises and facilities, and the Coldwell venture, which had begun in an abandoned barn in Maryland, USA, became a state within a state in British Columbia, Canada. Maximum security would guard against the invention of mankind and any aeroplane flying into by fighter craft to an outside airport from which its occupants might not be freed if their stories did not suit the authorities. The combined intelligence of America, Canada, and Britain would make it certain that plans and development of the round-wing plane would never again be stolen by a foreign power. Wow. The fact that the Germans had acquired the original Coldwell patent and drawings had never ceased to anger and embarrass the United States intelligence. But in 1943, some providential information about the German round-wing plane development enabled the Americans to retaliate. The task would be to steal people. Allied intelligence headquarters in London revealed that 3 of Germany's top scientists wished to defect from Hitler's round-wing plane program. Now, defection or possible infiltration under the guise of defection. We'll cross this bridge later, because there's been irrefutable proof that's come out recently, everyone, in relation to this, that Operation Paperclip was all not on behalf of the US's plans, but all part of Hitler's plans, allowing his scientists to be taken up through Operation Paperclip and defect to the US to infiltrate every compartmentalized part of infrastructure within the intelligence and space program facilities and communities, okay, and technologies. This has come out recently, so we'll cover this later on, okay? Yes, here we go. To retaliate. The task would be to steal people. Yes, that's okay. Round-wing program. Their skills were metallurgy, chemistry, and mathematics, and a profound understanding of electronics, a new technology in the 1940s. All of these scientists and skills were useful in several areas of construction, which the Allied space program in British Columbia desperately required. That's called compartmentalization. 5 Americans were dropped at night in Germany amid intense ground fire from the secret installation against which the raid was conducted. Under the quiet and assuming leadership of the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, Colonel Williams, nicknamed the Fox by the Germans, the group cut their way through barbed and electric wire into the camp. 2 guards were silently garroted, and the American infiltrators, 3 of whom spoke perfect German, entered the building where the defectors lay sound asleep. Once identified, the German scientists were awakened, and before they could exclaim in surprise, their mouths were taped without incident. Each was given 10 minutes to fully dress in the darkness. Back through the fence, the American OSS men and their willing hostages crawled to the outside as 2 Yanks lingered to repair the electric wire with the jumper cables so the current would flow undetected. 4 miles away, the 8 men followed their map coordinates off a main road down a narrow, dirty path that dead-ended. Suddenly, 2 camouflage jeeps were seen indistinctly, and cheery English voice called out, "I say there, you chaps. We wondered what kept you." I can imagine it. "I say there, you chaps." Colonel Fox grinned. 3 days later, travelling only at night and hiding in prearranged rendezvous, the group reached a lonely Swiss border post which opened as if prearranged. Stopping at Bern, the British and American agents disbanded. The 3 Germans, each on a different plane, began their trips, which eventually took them to the pulse of the English-speaking world's round-wing development located in a pioneer town far away from British Columbia, Canada. In the months that followed, one of the Germans provided invaluable help in perfecting the electronic gear
of the craft. Another immediate contribution resulted in the vast improvement of the craft's former lethargic liftoff, and the third German defector used his mathematical ability along with that of the metallurgist to redesign the framework. Following the war, the families of these German scientists joined them along with 183 German round-wing technologists who were later recruited. Many of them live today in British Columbia and California. Excuse me. By mid-1941, employment offices throughout North America were set up in such points as San Francisco, Detroit, and Toronto, and special skills were sought. Drafted labor general bachelors were enticed to move to British Columbia with its special amenities in a brand new town. Each was carefully chosen for his stability and reliability. Before the end of the year, new production lines were filled with skilled men ready to begin turning out round-wing planes in a revolutionary aircraft industry. When the US entered the war in December of 1941, production was stepped up and the new valley town geared to become the Detroit of the Pacific Northwest. Interesting. The Cold War planners, of the advice of the US Air Force, decided that they would produce a new pressurized 98-foot long-range ship designed to be equipped with a successfully tested laser beam. They opted for a maximum range of 20 hours and 25,000 miles in destination to Germany and return, or if need be, non-stop around the world. The new jet-equipped model would slice the air in rain or shine at 750 miles per hour cruising speed above the range of the best German anti-aircraft guns. But production difficulties were still being encountered, and the planners wished desperately for more skilled workers in the new techniques required to build the plane. Shortly after the arrival of the German scientists, there also began appearing, as if in answer to the planners' wishes, super skilled tradesmen who, according to their applications, had been hired in various North American centers. These men all spoke English with the same unrecognizable accent, and it was also observed that these people preferred to speak among themselves in an unknown tongue. The hiring personnel estimated that there were at least 450 such strangers. Another odd thing noted about these workers was a preference for their own company. But whether on the job of the tool and die making or drafting, their craftsmanship was so superb that they seemed to have been pre-trained and thoroughly experienced. Furthermore, their members often suggested techniques to improve manufacture, design, and production. At a meeting in June of 1942, Jonathan Caldwell, aware of the new superior workers, called a top management meeting of the governing body. Rumors had been rife at the plant about the foreigners in the workforce. "Gentlemen," said Coleman, "authorities in Washington and Ottawa have alerted me that our plant workforce has recently been augmented by the arrival of skilled workers, each of whom has identical vocabulary and accent. I've been told they are all graduates of a central interplanetary language school located on another planet named Venus. That is how the final work was broken to the management that the Allied round-wing effort was being aided from another world. Whether that world seeped through to the workers of earthly origin is not known." The military had come to believe that the object of the friendly infiltration was to aid the Cold War group in turning out a superior round-wing plane in such numbers and superior quality as to make the Allied war effort invincible for the day they would be used to crush the enemy. To the civil authorities in charge of key planning, it would be decided later which to deploy first, the Manhattan atom bomb or the Jefferson round-wing plane. If atom bomb tests failed over the Nevada desert, then most certainly the round-wing plane fleet would become the primary offensive weapon. Unfortunately, the Allied military, on accepting this advanced aid from another planet, had not understood that the visitors intended the Allies to develop only technical superiority in the air by means of the round-wing plane. The aliens empathetically forbade its use destructively over Germany or Japan. This denial on the part of the Venusians for military use of the round-wing plane would be a moral problem that would frustrate the Allies during the entire war. But the governing board in the British Columbia Space Center, known as Project X, was not prepared for the extraterrestrial shock which befell them in mid-1942. Production kinks had been cleared up and a new plane was being finished every 36 hours. Wow. Student pilots from Kelly Field were arriving to take further advanced training in the new planes, and the Valley complex grew steadily each month. In the summer of 1943, a strange ship dropped out of the sky and stopped in a clearing near Caldwell's office. As a crowd began to gather, a tall, dark-haired stranger stepped down carrying a black suitcase. His introductory words were, "I wish to speak to Jonathan Caldwell. I bring something necessary for the improvement of a new round-wing plane." After some confusion and delay by security forces, the unannounced visitor was eventually taken to Caldwell, where he introduced himself, saying simply he was from the capital city of the planet Venus, wherein dwelt a sister race of planet Earth. Many Venusian workers and others of intergalactic origin are already helping you in your plant. Then, asking permission to open a small suitcase, he lifted out a round device weighing less than 5 pounds. He addressed himself to Caldwell. "We have been watching your progress for several months at this location. Some time back, we decided to send skilled workers to help the English-speaking people working here, sponsored by the industrial might of the United States. Object of the aid was to expedite your production plans. I shall not give you our entire reasons for this help, except to say that our extraterrestrial foresight of world happenings is greater than that of the Earthlings. But in observing the North American beginnings is the design and manufacture of your new native invented round-wing plane. We have not been disappointed. In typical American fashion, you have built a fleet of planes that lack only a few modifications, or should I say, breakthroughs, to enable you to explore space. The round-wing plane is the most impressive aircraft in your entire world." The stranger was interrupted. "But you, sir, didn't come here to simply compliment our war effort," spoke up Caldwell. "Definitely not," said the visitor. "I have been sent here on a mission of aid. But first, may I request that I be permitted to become part of your management group for a few weeks, if you don't object. To show my good faith, I have been instructed to present a special gift before I explain my liaison. The gift from my home planet is this." The speaker then held up in his hand for all to see what he termed as an anti-magnetic motor with which to power the largest of the new planes. It will take the place of your excellent jet motor. It will take the place of your excellent new jet motor, he'd added. More than one of his listeners smiled. All knew the jet motor and its accessories weighed at least 1,000 pounds. Another looked at this device and held it in the alien's hands and laughed. Ignoring the interruptions, the stranger continued. "Of course, I know you think I'm joking. Therefore, to prove my credibility, we will test this motor in one of your completed 98-foot ships. We will do it today if you don't object. Then, if you are satisfied," he said, turning to Caldwell, "I'll remain long enough to show you how to modify your existing ships and set up facilities to build the motors for future production." Someone said, "It looks like it came out of a refrigerator or a washing machine." I can imagine the mentality of people back then thinking that. As the motor was passed around for examination, the stranger smiled politely. Caldwell knew what his advisors were thinking. Up to 40% of the power generated by a conventional motor was used in moving the weight and mass of that motor before it could lift or move its payload. Next day, on Caldwell's instructions, the new 5-pound motor was mounted temporarily on a round wing plane, the jet remaining in place. Electric circuits were shut off on the huge jet motor, and Caldwell himself entered the ship along with the pilot and the other executives as the Venusian spaceman took controls. The motor was turned on, and like a toy ship, the huge craft lifted silently straight upwards. Wow. In a movement, the group was looking down on the valley from several hundred feet. An astonished Caldwell eagerly took the controls. When the craft landed a few minutes after the anti-gravity lift test, the being suggested they hover over a Sherman tank and attach a steel cable from the tank bolts to the round wing plane. The tank weighed several tons more than the plane. Attachments completed, the plane slowly rose as the cable became tight. Ground onlookers yelled as the round wing plane, with the 5-pound propulsion anti-magnetic motor imported from Venus, rose in the air and carried the tank aloft as though it were a leaf from a tree. There you go, electromagnetic gravitics, making mass less in weight. The tank, in fact, had become weightless. There you go. Turning to the crew, the alien mentioned that it would be easy to lift a 10-story office building. He explained that when the iron chain was placed around the tank, it also became electromagnetic by repulsing the Earth's magnetism, as did the plane itself, i.e. the tank lifted became an integral part of the ship. The original motor described above is now mounted and stored in a glass showcase in the US Air Force Underground Vault in Kensington. Wow. Not on for public display, of course. The visiting alien later unfolded plans for motor manufacture on site. In the future design, the small anti-gravity motor would provide ascent and descent propulsion, operating in conjunction with precise magnetic points of fluctuation in the plane's perimeter for horizontal flight. All combinations of horizontal and vertical flight patterns would be handled by a panel computer. The electromagnetic energy of the universe would run the planes from now on. Furthermore, the round wing plane capacity would not require space for the big jet, and another third of the interior capacity would be freed for fuel storage and converted to equipment installation or cargo. The great power of the new motor would also enable the engineers to reinforce the lightweight girder frame from the craft with heavier load-bearing materials. But before the visitor settled down, he had another surprise package for which he went back to his ship. When he emerged, he carried under his arm what looked like a roll of plain, pewter-coloured wallpaper, but much thinner. In the next few days, the Caldwell staff discussed the application of the new material. It has been brought fresh from a Venus rolling mill, and the Earth engineers were told there was enough of the paper-thin substance to cover at least 6 ships if applied within the next 7 curing days. A craft just off the assembly line was set aside, and the man who still insisted he came from the planet Venus stretched out and cut the material to cover all exposed surfaces. 6 ships were covered. The new material would be case hardened and ready for flight in a year. When you roll these 6 craft out in September of 1944, the alien explained, you'll be able to circumnavigate the globe in an hour if you wish, and the impervious skins will not overheat. By the end of 1944, there were 500 round-wing planes with new motors, three model sizes, 98 foot, 60 foot, and 33 foot, stored in the British Columbia Valley. The skilled workers, presumably from Venus, had gradually departed in unaccountable ways after training a labour force which had become their equal. Also, by late 1944, advanced versions of Caldwell's craft and their crews were training daily in formation, flying over the Pacific Northwest. Increased speeds far beyond 3,000 miles per hour had eliminated the obsolete rudder. The alien advisor had also left plans for a new battery and an improved landing gear, which with self-propelled caster bottoms. Also, the plane could now hurl themselves from a great height to ground level by reversing the motor from magnetic repulsion to attraction. Near point of ground impact, the motor again automatically reversed to repel, at which time the landing tripods were electronically lowered to Earth. The crews referred to this technique as ballooning the ship to the ground. Pilot jargon for setting down the ship and cutting the motor was called peaceful landing. Wow. Interesting information. I'm just going to have a quick sip of my coffee. Okay. Regarding gravity, the reader should abandon his present concept and rest assured that in such landing, the crew would not feel the elevator effect of either a free fall or lift off. There are no gravitational forces exerted on the human body in such a ballooning, landing, or sudden liftoff from ground level, because the entire crew becomes part of the round wing plane itself, just like the tank, and therefore does not have to overcome gravity. The crew and their plane make use of the properties of attraction and repulsion and magnetism in order to function with gravity, rather than trying to overcome that force. The small motor size and the stronger interior also permitted a doubling of from a crew of 6 to 12 if necessary for a military mission, or more passengers if used as a passenger carrier. But also important, most new models were downsized to 60 feet in diameter when free magnetic energy made unnecessary extra storage space for the liquid fuels which formerly fed the jet motors. One day in September, the alien requested that Jonathan Caldwell assemble all the governing board and other executives. He complimented the Earthmen in the valley for the use of their small radio-controlled drone planes, wow, in 44, used for testing the aerodynamic possibilities in the later full-scale models. You people here, he said, referring to the Valley Complex workers, are way ahead of any Earth nation in development of the round-wing plane, first invented by your native son, Caldwell. That is why, among your other reasons, we advanced people of this solar system decided to lend you some help. I beg of you, however, don't misuse that help we have given you. Well, it seems as though it certainly has been misused in the last 60, 70 years, hasn't it? Then the polite stranger dropped a bombshell on his listeners. Your leaders have already been told that we would not like you to use these new planes in this war except on a limited basis. Any thoughts you have in mind for punitive action should be dropped. Looking at the US Force Liaison Officer, he said, although I loathe war, I must trust in your military superiors to heed my advice and not use this new machine as a weapon, but rather as a conveyance to expedite the ending of this present unnecessary worldwide conflict. This entire solar system is watching your tragic war. We do not want you to use this new invention to deliver to an enemy your latest explosive device. He referred to the atom bomb, which you are now perfecting. Oppenheimer. It has been released just recently, the rhetoric of the new Oppenheimer movie to the public recently and further trying to solidify within the public's minds. Yes, can see how, yeah. Need I say more? We have already provided you with new motors, but we shall withhold the formula for the skins. Thus, without that formula, to prevent overheating of the ship's outer surfaces, ultimate speed necessary to leave and re-enter planet Earth's atmosphere must be carefully controlled. Someday, when the time is ripe, we will help you in this regard also. In the meantime, be content with what you have. He ended by saying, almost apologetically, on our planet, as in this entire solar system, war is outlawed. More important than this technological help I have brought with the blessings of our nation is the fact that war on earth must also be outlawed. When war on earth is over, then Earth men and women will be shown how to use their own resources of men and materials to venture into space. The Venetian had stayed 4 months. He constantly gave his directions to the Superintendent General Caldwell, who in turn comprehended their significance in production techniques and passed on the alien suggestions to the Earth planners. The new team functioned smoothly as the guiding genius sent from another world sat in the councils of Earth, developers of the round-wing plane, and together they built a fleet of marvelous craft. The alien was known simply as Mr. Lewis. One day said goodbye to his new compatriots. Taking the hand of Jonathan Caldwell, the alien said softly, "I salute you, sir. You are the man who first was called out of your country to point the way forward for people of Earth. You showed men how to fly without wings." As the stranger said goodbye to a host of friends, a ship dropped out of the sky and he departed aboard it. In a group photo taken before departure, the place where the alien stood was blank. Well, that's chapter 6. Now, just in touching on base quickly on that gentleman by the name of Mr. Lewis that is referred to in this book, I do believe later on has been referred to as being Thorhan, the valiant Thor, who came and worked for a period of time with the OSS and Mr. William Tompkins, who Mr. William Tompkins, for those of you who don't know, is responsible for the design and manufacturing and rollout of our secret space program, Space Navy. Ships, yes, massive ships. And now, if you want anything to be of reference to that, I ask for everyone here to basically go and have a look at Stargate SG-1. I'll leave some links as well in the description as well for you in relation to Dr. Salla's work, in relation to William Tompkins, and what he has covered in relation to this subject and these topics. Okay, so yes, very interesting. I do believe it's Valiant Thor that they're talking about, and considering the position that we're at right now and the information that's rolling forth, Thor and Thorhan and the Galactic Federation are all about still. They're all working presently with our US global alliance, our actual global alliance, which is what I believe has been referred to in soft disclosure to the public as Space Force, which is really our secret space program operating for the last 60 years. Okay. And we'll get to those sorts of subjects and topics later as we go through the chapters as this moves forward. Okay, so we've got chapter 7 now, Allied development of the round-wing plane during World War II. 1943 was World War II's turning point. As the year ended, hostilities in Europe continued with Germany, still appearing to be strong, but enemy reverses were occurring. German confidence began to ebb as American entry into the war helped roll back German armies in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. On the eastern front of the Russians, with vast amounts of American lend-lease equipment, were starting to counterattack after a long period of German mauling. In December of 1943, a new commander, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, was appointed to lead the Western Allies. And the same month, 3,000 British and American planes bombarded the French coast in a single night and day, while another fleet of bombers sent Berlin sirens wailing. 7 months later, the enemy on the Western Front would be in retreat, and Paris would surrender. Control of the sea lanes also provided to be as decisive as the winning of land battles. Thus, 17,000 merchant ships were dispatched by the US to keep the lifeline open to England, Europe, and Russia, and the conflict's balance of power tipped over in favour of the Allies, despite staggering losses to U-boat action. Britain had held the beach till the American industrial colossus flowed over the Atlantic onto European shores and turned the tide against Germany's short-gain fortunes. By 1943, growing numbers of round-wing planes from the Canadian Valley had been appearing over Europe. The round-wing pilots were graduate aviators of the Technical Training Flight School located in the BC Valley, British Columbia Valley. General Caldwell was also the officer in charge of this manpower training, as well as superintendent of the entire manufacturing complex. A wartime aircraft crew consisted of 6 airmen on each round-wing plane. A combined operational group always included 1 British and 1 Canadian, along with the American personnel. Scattered among various crews were Australians and New Zealanders, as well as a handful of Norwegians. Preuss's Australians were being recruited, and New Zealanders being recruited into secret space programs by these specific dates, 1943, as you can all see here. Okay. The new ships boasted sleek and smooth silhouettes with flaps and outside surface controls not distinguishable. The new pilot class could execute intricate patterns either singly or in formation that made those sighting the airborne ships gaze in wonder. Day and night over England and Scotland, the greater bomber and fighter armadas heading for the continent often reported the presence of vanishing lights thought to be extraterrestrial. They would be seen one moment and gone the next. According to viewers, there was one common denominator in all sightings. The strange and aloof phenomena showed an apparent affinity to watch over and protect Allied planes. Interesting. Jonathan Caldwell and his wife loved their children, but each was particularly anxious about their son, who had volunteered as a B-29 bomber pilot and done several missions over Germany. Olive, Caldwell's wife, kept praying their boy would be safe. On one such daytime bombing raid, young Caldwell felt a presence he could not explain. Looking above him, he saw a huge round-wing escort plane sailing along at his same speed. Like a mother hen, the round-wing crane and craft wobbled in a friendly way. It flew on and then repeated its wobbling, which seemed to say hello to the American fixed-wing bomber crew. Guessing it was a salutatory signal, the bomber captained by Caldwell dipped its wings, and young pilot Caldwell smiled and raised his hand in a V for victory sign. Reaching target area over a heavy flak region, the round-wing plane on occasion dropped below the bomber and took some direct hits, but it continued unflinchingly through the danger zone. When Caldwell got home that night, he took his wife aside and assured her, "Everything's all right. I flew escort with our son today." When the young Caldwell got a furlough, he came home for a visit and told a story. "Dad, I must tell you about the friendly round-winged bird that protected us on a raid. At times, I pretended it was you there, Dad, but I know you're too old." Caldwell was 45. The parents smiled. Unknown to the Allied airmen, these lights, seen weaving among the formations on each mission, were operated perhaps by friends they knew back home in Kansas City, Halifax, or Manchester. The elusive sky visitors, which resembled luminous balls of fire at high speeds, were nicknamed Foo Fighters. These round-wing planes were not just for practice or pageantry or to confuse regular aircraft pilots and observers. They had purpose. They acted as a guardian system to a target, often relaying information back to London, allowing Allied planes to take evasive action. They also took composite pictures of targets before and after raids. When not busy, the planes occasionally buzzed German formations, and in a more serious vein, they also observed the flight directions and numbers in enemy formations headed for Britain. But of course, they were not available during the heroic Battle of Britain that broke the back of Goring's Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe, yeah, very famous battle group of the German army, or German Air Force. A brisk Atlantic traffic of diplomatic and scientific personnel was also transported via the planes, and the round-wing technical air command provided Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill with a plane should occasion demand. Should an unforeseen misfortune, quite apart from technology or enemy threat, was to fall upon the Valley complex, the problem was Caldwell himself. His innovations and leadership abilities became drained because of his wife, Olive. She was on the brink of death. In fact, her doctor finally told Caldwell recovery was hopeless. Olive was terminally ill. At best, she had a week to live. Caldwell's spirit flagged, and as had his supervision for some point, others took the matter into their own hands when Caldwell, a Protestant, demanded that the priest be sent to say last rites before his dying wife, a Catholic. The U.S. liaison chief sent the urgent request to Washington's headquarters because the matter of security was so touchy. The U.S. Air Force requested help from the OSS. The OSS moved immediately, Office of Strategic Services. One of its top European agents, a graduate of West Point, a confirmed priest who had been recalled to America for a new assignment, was contacted. He was also known by his code name of Father John, a devout but taught Christian as well as a soldier. Father John was flown to Seattle, where he boarded another military plane. He alighted to the British Columbia Valley in the uniform of Brigadier General, carrying a black flat briefcase initialed my mistake, everyone. Initialed Father John S.J., inside of which there was a Bible, an open book, and 2 gold crosses. A nervous Caldwell met him. On seeing a military man, Caldwell exploded. I asked for a priest, not a soldier. Quietly, Father John sat down his briefcase. I am a Christian first, a priest second, and a Catholic third. I serve a living Savior. Caldwell calmed down under the charisma and confidence of the big 6'1" priest. 6'1", big boy. When they reached the bedroom where Olive lay dying, this post-medical officer stood by. He confirmed that she had a few hours of life, or a day or 2 at most. She was in a coma. Father John unfolded from his bag the smaller of the 2 gold crosses and hung it at the head of the brass bed. The doctor The silence was deeper as Father John gave the ritual of the last rites, anointing Olive's forehead with a mixture of blessed olive oil and salt. Tears filled Caldwell's eyes. His wife had been part of the round-wing dream since he had been a young man. She had sacrificed everything to stay by his side when he had spent all of his abilities on the plan's reality in later years. Now, the one person who understood him and who he needed the most was dying. That's that. The spoken soft words of Father John could again be heard. Father God, I have done my priestly duty to this soul who is speeding on her eternal rest. But Father God, I beseech you, in the name of Christ, to delay the return of this soul to thee. Father John's voice grew louder. The priest then took the larger cross and placed it before her eyes. Evil spirit, in the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to be gone from this child of God. Suddenly, the woman in coma jerked her head from the pillow and threw an arm over her eyes to resist the gold cross. In a moment, her body trembled violently and sat up. The evil spirit had fled. Father John helped her to sit on her side of the bed, and in a moment she put her feet on the floor. Beads of perspiration showed on Father John's forehead, and his eyes turned upwards. We praise and thank thee for my faithfulness, O Christ, he repeated. Wow, that's powerful. No one moved as Father John stood erect and waited suddenly for those to see. There stood at the foot of the bed a full-size three-dimensional figure. All knew instinctively he was Christ. Seconds went by as the soft light, brighter than a day, bathed the room. Then Olive Caldwell looked around and exclaimed, "What are we doing here?" The Christ figure had faded, faded around Olive, but remained aglow. The spirit of a living and healing Christ had filled her. Wow. It's amazing. Coffee's finished. Okay. They all went into the living room where Olive served coffee and cakes to Father John and the doctor. She beamed all over. "Please stay with us tonight," she begged Father John. But the big American priest of Scottish descent excused himself and affectionately said his farewells. As he left, he cautioned the Caldwells, "Don't make that room or this house a shrine. We serve a living Christ. He is not confined to a room. He is everywhere." The record of that visit is among the OSS papers of Father John located in the National Archives. See epilogue about Olive Caldwell's recovery and retirement years. The Valley complex was back to normal and Caldwell's vigour returned. The glowing success surrounding the performance of the new round wing air arm caused people in high places to respond. Towards the end of the war, the Allied round wing complex had two memorable occasions that came close to being called holidays. The first of these events occurred in late December of 1943 when President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill visited the aerospace complex along with their host, Prime Minister Mackenzie King. The three personages arrived in the private railway car of President Roosevelt after crossing into Canada at Winnipeg, Manitoba, and proceeding west into the British Columbia Valley. An American band met the train and played the national anthem and Hail to the Chief. A British band, the Royal Fusiliers, played God Save the King and ended up along with the American band in playing the anthem, O Canada. Wow, that would have been a spectacle. The leaders stayed a day. On addressing the airmen, President Roosevelt touched each of their nerve centers when he told them they were not the forgotten men of the war about which they had been grousing. The president dropped a secret. "You men are being trained for what is intended to be the most secret and decisive project of the war. Stand ready," he said, "for that moment when we shall call you to deliver the greatest rebuke to the Nazis on behalf of your countries. For on that day, when you are called to be ready, climb into your new round wing armada and cross the top of the world to destroy the enemy in an hour's time." When the cheering response quietened down, Churchill rose and within a few appointed phrases said he agreed on behalf of his nation that the men of the Valley had not been forgotten but were actually being trained for one quick knockout blow of the iniquitous Nazi scourge that had taken over Germany. The idea to destroy Germany in a single round-wing strike is attributed to the planning of Roosevelt and Churchill. Later, in speaking to one of the station's top executives, Churchill is said to have remarked, "Into this valley, with this awesome power of round planes, we English-speaking people have placed all our hope for a shortening of the war, in case everything else should fail." President Roosevelt caught that vision of the military relevance of the round wing plane back in 1936. He shared it with British and Canadian heads of state. Later, in which that cooperation between the three nations that enabled Jonathan E. Caldwell and his staff to make President Roosevelt's dream become a reality. On September 18th, 1944, Station Commander General Caldwell, ordered a full review of his 3,000 airmen at 8 a.m. The unsuspecting airmen assembled, waiting for a routine inspection. Suddenly, out of the sky, one of their own 98-foot craft appeared, and the attention of all the airmen was riveted on the descending machine. As it touched down close to the formation, right on a prescribed circle, 1,000 voices murmured in unison, "Peaceful landing." Wow. Then out from beneath the round-winged plane, the assembled airmen saw emerge the figure of a tall, smiling, immaculately dressed soldier covered with ribbons. As he left the shadow of the craft, a cheer went up from the ranks of the men. The flight officer yelled, "Attention!" As General Eisenhower took hands with Station Commander Caldwell and other officers, the entourage moved to the assembled troops. 3,000 Allied airmen saluted their chief in honor. And airmen boasted later the cheers could be heard in Vancouver. Before Ike, as in Eisenhower, where is that? Sorry. Oh, jeez, I've just lost my spot. Sorry. Before Ike had reached the troops, he was joined by a second figure in a black beret who, because of his victories in North Africa, had recently been made a Viscount. He was Bernard L. Montgomery, and he came forward to join the commander-in-chief of the Allied military scattered throughout Europe. The British airmen took up their cheer again, and quickly the Canadians and Commonwealth buddies had voice as the Americans in final crescendo raised the roof of the valley. Montgomery addressed the airmen in an overlong dialogue. Eisenhower summed up his own thoughts in less than half an hour. He told the assembled airmen, "The moment for which you have been trained, the time when you will be called strike the enemy, is not far off." The Allied war leaders that later turned giant aerospace facilities, General Eisenhower talked informally with Caldwell. A young genius in his mid-40s, General Eisenhower praised him. "There is no way we can adequately express our thanks for what you have done for the Allied cause and for freedom." The Allied leaders had left a station in Britain before daylight Pacific Coast time by way of Iceland, Greenland, Baffin Island, and Hudson Bay. They had flown non-stop, watching the sun rise over Port Churchill, Manitoba, and racing 10 times faster than the speed of sound to their destination. They sat down with friends for a Canadian breakfast of ham and eggs over several thousand miles away from the shores from which they had departed. Upon leaving, again, they would be back in London, England, on a leisurely trip of about 2 hours' time. Wow. That's pretty impressive. Another momentous occasion arose at the end of 1944, almost a year after the visits of the Allied political leaders. The Valley's air station had been on a constant alert in late December. Something was imminent. On the last week of the year, the huge 500 fleet of round-wing planes took off early one morning for Germany. The pre-planned targets were strategic German cities. Roosevelt had vetoed an earlier attempt that month by Allied and German generals, including Eisenhower, General Patton, and von Brunstedt, to end the fighting in the West. Now the round-wing air arm was on its way to execute the end of hostilities in Roosevelt's own way. The terrible lasers had not been installed in the new round-wing planes, but in their holds, several of the planes carried the new atomic bomb, while the others carried bomb bays full of blockbuster explosives. As the other planes appeared over German skies in mass, a long cigar-shaped craft was seen by several squadron leaders as it watched from high above. The first targets were reached and orders given to prepare bombs and finally bombs away. Well, the cigar-shaped one that they're referring to here is what I believe is called the Dreadnought class cigar-shaped ships originally developed by Germany towards the end of World War II. Okay, let's go up a bit. Okay. but not one plane could really release its cargo of destruction. All electrical circuits connected with the bomb's delivery were dead. Radios, too, were silent. Finally, in consternation, the fleet followed the lead ships and back to Canada. They landed without incident, and maintenance men examined the planes. Then, as if on cue, the entire fleet became electrically functional again. High above, a cigar-shaped craft of gigantic proportions moved off into the unknown. Allied intelligence sources say the Germans, under Hitler earlier, technological blessings from the aliens when the Nazis embarked on a plan to use their 5 round-wing planes to bomb major American cities, including New York and Washington. The enemy intended dropping new instruments of mass destruction called atom bombs, which the Germans had produced at about the same time as the Allies. The first Hiroshima was to have been New York. Hitler himself is said to have ordered the raid. The planes left Germany, but what happened thereafter is unknown. Did the extraterrestrials prevent the planned deaths of so many countless humans and the mass destruction of cities? It seems most likely. Here is why. The alien who visited Roosevelt in 1943 told him that the extraterrestrials were totally aware of the round-wing plane then being developed by Caldwell's group. Then the alien reminded Roosevelt it could be used as a blessing or an evil. He warned the president not to use it for evil purposes, reminded of that warning while authorizing the German strike. President Roosevelt replied, "Let's forget the aliens. We now have the round-wing planes. We intend to use them, just as important as the words of the extraterrestrial who visited them in 1943 is the warning of the alien scientists who sent down to Earth's aerospace valley in British Columbia." Wow, that's pretty interesting. When he departed in 1943, he reminded Jonathan Caldwell, as Germany, in the absence of Hitler, surrendered unconditionally as the Allied generals accepted surrender at Eisenhower's Heimskirchen headquarters at 2:41 a.m. French time, May 7th. A fleet of 500 round-wing planes dropped down from 60,000 feet and plummeted to a 3,000-foot elevation over Belgrade, Berlin. If someone can correct me in the comments, that'd be great. There, in a mile-long letters executed by the round-wing planes, German civilians and Russian troops below stared up at a huge lighted sign which spelled out in English the word surrender. Now, stay in the... The Germans had catapulted after 5 years, 8 months, and 6 days of bloodiest conflict in history. Neither side had been able to use their round-wing planes for destruction of each other. Neither the Allies, 500 planes, or the Germans, 5. Wow. Earlier on the morning of May 5th, when the surrender was first announced over the BBC radio, Allied soldiers and Englishmen and women had jammed downtown London, Trafalgar Square, teamed with masses of singing people. The lights came back on, and in front of the Whitehall, huge crowds shouted impromptu for Prime Minister Churchill. As the Prime Minister appeared on the balcony, he stuck his cigar trademark in his mouth and raised his hand in a V for victory symbol. Then the cheering crowd stopped as all heads turned upwards. The entire London sky, as in Berlin, was filled with strange speeding lights. Unquestionably, they spelled out the word victory. In this first public admission of the aerial phenomena, the British Prime Minister tried to explain that the formations above were one of the secret weapons the Allies had chosen not to use in winning the war. As the heavenly lights disappeared across the English countryside, there left in their wake a mystery, which no one on their Allied side spoke of again. Again, Across all Britain, the airborne formation flew in slow parade. As the round-wing plane assemblage moved on in silent tribute, the huge word victory blazoned over the hometowns of many young Scottish, English and Welsh and Irish pilots and crewmen. Wow. From the countryside below, jubilant Britons occasionally saw packets attached to small parachutes flutter down from the strange birds or round-wing planes. Retrieved, the finders noted that the packets contained dozens of letters on RAF stationery with British stamps affixed to the envelopes. Each packet was wrapped in a special binder which said, "Finder, please take to the nearest postmaster." The next few days across the British Isles, the letters from the sky were being delivered to cottages and flats by the score. On opening one such letter, a lonely Englishwoman worrying about her son might have read, "Dear Mum, sorry I've been away so long, but I'm coming home soon. Love, your son." Wow. During the next week, the jubilant British sang, danced, paraded, and worshipped as each in his or her own way threw off the shackles of years of wartime regimentation. But quietly, the British War Office had planned another surprise that to this day has never been told except to those in the know. In the early morning blackness of May 15th, several giant round-wing planes dropped out of the overcast and hovered above a field on an island off the Scottish coast. British lights shone down on the turf as the machine sat quietly down on each of its tripod legs. And from the stairs below each craft, young Britishers stepped down with their few belongings and moved silently away into the darkness. Shortly thereafter, 12 assembled fishing boats took aboard over 480 men and headed for the mainland. The fishing boats normally hauled goods vans southward towards major coastal cities, but the skippers had been called by the Ministry of Fisheries for a special task that morning. Sworn to silence, only the skippers knew that they had been asked to pick up nearly 500 war heroes. As the young men huddled on the cold deck of one of the ships, an old Scottish fisherman, obviously trying to goad the young passengers into revealing their point of origin, remarked slowly, "Aim on, I've seen everything now. All you lads spending your days on that Forlorn island while the rest of the world was busy fighting a war." Above the boats, over 20 strange craft blinked their lights in farewell of the young airmen as they looked up and smiled with nostalgia for their air training home in far-away Canada. In the morning, as dawn broke over Scotland's most northerly village, served by rail, a young Royal Scot steam train stood slowly puffing and waiting. The town's industry, a nearby cannery, had not yet opened. Meanwhile, the young warriors who had manned the world's greatest World War II inventions assembled at the station. The wail of the bagpipes was heard, and the music to the Scottish ears came in a medley of homecoming tunes played by the Bank of the Scots Guard from Edinburgh Castle. The band had come up on the train. As the last "all aboard" was sounded, the engineer called to the firemen, "It's all 3-hour run to Edinburgh." It's a 3-run hour to Edinburgh. We have an hour's stop while these passengers stretch their legs, and the biggest and best breakfast the city of Edinburgh can dish up. All the other trains can take second place, even if we meet up with King George himself. But London was waiting for the special train. Prime Minister Churchill was on hand, and so was King George VI, accompanied by His Majesty's Coldstream Guards. As each man disembarked from the train, they lined up to received a handshake and a medal from the king. On the medal were inscribed the words, "For valour beyond the call of duty." The demob officer had already spoken to the young heroes. "For the remainder of your lives, you men must be content to know of the courage with which you served the cause. But remember, you can never share the secret of the round wing plane with anyone, as difficult as this order may seem to be. But someday, the wisdom of the top brass, perhaps somebody will be allowed to tell. I hope we are still alive by then. The Britishers melted into the crowd and headed for their homes. Each carried a paper giving him a choice of honourable discharge or re-volunteering for the round wing plane service. In Canada, the airmen were discharged at Ottawa. The Americans were taken to Tacoma, Washington. Today, the identities of the pioneer airmen are not known, but on the wall of the Canadian Air Minister is a plaque referred to as the Silver List. Engraved there are names of approximately 500 Canucks. Wow. The Regiment of Royal Fusiliers, who had been employed mainly as security forces by the British Columbians Valley during the war years, got home to Britain in 1947. Some of them had left Scotland by round-wing plane, but all were returned by train to the New York and then by ship to England. The United States emerged from World War II as the world's undisputed superpower. Before the war ended, she had become the world's leading shipbuilder. She had supplied the Allies with more shipping tonnage than both Britain and the US possessed in 1939. Her expansion of conventional air power enabled the Allies to dominate the European skies. And once engaged over the battlefields, the United States had trained and equipped 12 million armed men deployed with over 50 allies on various fronts, while still providing the Russians with massive shiploads of lend-lease armament. And when the war was over and rebuilding of the continent began, it was the Airman Marshall Plan that got the Europeans, including the former enemy, back on their industrial feet. From 1941 to 45, the US War Council had managed to divert scientists and technicians to the Manhattan Bomb Project while still carrying on with manufacture and delivery of conventional armament, not to mention the added brain power required to research and produce the Jefferson Round Wing Plane project that eventually housed a small city of workers. The costs were shared between all three Allied powers based on population ratio. The audacious total American wartime achievements had been burdensome in taxes. The national debt rose from $50 billion in 1940 to $250 billion in 1945, nearly 9 times of this amount expended on winning the conflict to liberate Europe and the Pacific. Quite apart from the manufacture of conventional war apparatus, the industrial miracle of the Allies, shared mainly by the USA, was that a revolutionary air arm of round-wing planes and their trained crews had been developed in secret, without disrupting the effort of the country's 6 million men and women military labor force. Inevitably, the secret was not perfectly kept, but leaks in every case were plugged before serious breaches of security could occur. Although the war ended in victory for the Allies, the Americans were always acutely aware that, if need be, the scales of justice would have to have been tipped in their favor had they introduced the advanced round-wing plane and its awesome laser power. Yet, in spite of the disastrous war that bled America and the world of so much of its valuable resources, she still managed to carry herself and the globe into a new age of free flight that before the century ends may become the prime mover of people and commerce. Said Canada's beloved scientist and World War II General A.G.L. McNaughton, isn't it ironic that it took a war to bring about such scientific achievements? Winston Churchill's quote called it the unnecessary war. President Eisenhower agreed. And to the young English boy who asked his grieving mother, Who won the war in which Daddy was killed? She replied, no one. Everybody lost. 16 million fathers and sons never came home, and nearly 10 million innocent civilians who died in the flames of war would have agreed had their voices been able to cry out. Well, that's bloody pretty powerful there, eh? I think that's the end of the chapter, everyone. We are up to chapter 8. Wow. So that's pretty impressive. So just in, briefly showing, some pictures here for you guys. Some of those round-wing aircraft that we're seeing and talking about here, I believe, is very similar to what I'm about to show you here. Okay, now this particular one here was photographed, and I believe it is the actual first generation. As you can see in the back there and there between the two offices in the middle, you can see the first generation craft that was described in chapter 3 that we read earlier in a previous show. Okay, now this is another photo that was released, I believe, also. Some of these round-wing plane that Germany was developing during 1943 and 42. Given the technology, roughly around about 1938. Okay. Now, this particular craft here is the Hanabu 3, I believe. You can see pretty closely a couple of airmen here working on them. Landing gear, gun turrets on the bottom, gun turrets on the top, electromagnetic gravitics, okay, as described. Here's one of the larger ones. And you can see there's a secondary here behind it, over to your right. But these are very large aircraft by any means and purposes, and as described as well, make mass weight less in distributing the electromagnetic field around the actual object, thus making it part of the object itself and less weight. So yeah, you can see that these things were developed very early in the 30s and 40s and still have not been released to public, and we're still using fossil fuels today. Why? And the reason being is because this is what the deep state holds on to. They use oil, petrodollar, fossil fuels, and Federal Reserve Bank to control ours and everyone's lives. Okay. You can meter electricity with the old system done by Edison. Tesla's system can't meter that. That's why it's free energy. It's just made from the universe and electromagnetic field of the planet. So something's got to give eventually, because this is all connected, all of this stuff, okay, in every way, shape, and form. But anyway, I've spoken long enough for the time being. I've gone on for 2 chapters now. It's been nearly an hour and 20 minutes. So I'm going to let you all go, everyone. I thank you for joining me again with Starseeds and Patriots of Down Under. Remember, I'll be leaving those links in the bottom in the description for everyone to go and have a look at some of this information with Dr. Salla as well. His channel will be in the description. And if you're also, as I said earlier, a new visitor here to my channel, please remember to subscribe while you can and hit that notification bell. And so, as always, everyone, I'll leave yous be. I bid yous adieu. I thank you for being here. I love you all. And just remember, everyone, unlearn and discern, okay? Take care until next time.